Sarah.
Apologies. Let me see if I can close the window so that I can actually be seen. That helps. Oh, this is bringing back lockdown memories, Emma.
I know.
I don't know if it is for everybody listening, but my goodness me.
It's funny, you can quite easily run a tasting of but kind of proper in-person tasting for 300 people, but put me online and I go to pieces completely.
But it's also the trains in the background and I was feeling very sorry for you because I could hear you and see you and was not not being able to be seen as a panelist.
No, well, brilliant. Well, you're here now, that's all that matters. So hello. And hello to all the members as well. Thank you all of you very much for joining us this evening. Sarah and I are delighted to be sharing our Friday night takeaway with you tonight, enjoying some pasta and wine. Did you manage to get yours knocked up, Sarah, in time?
I have. I've got 2 bowls of pasta and I've got 4 bottles of wine. So it's going to be a wonderful run.
To spend a Friday night. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Emma. I'm one of the tastings and events coordinators on the tastings team. I don't do these Zoom events very often, as you probably noticed, but hopefully I'll be doing a few more as time moves on. I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah, who I'm sure most of you know very well, the buyer for Italy, amongst other countries. And we've got Gil behind the scenes as well, who's up his tastings team too. He's going to be doing all the shenanigans behind the scenes and hopefully making sure everything runs smoothly.
Well, he's already earned a drink. He managed to get me on as a panelist. So thank you, Gil.
If any of you are new to this, then we probably should apologise now, shouldn't we? But it's very casual. So just let us know where you are, what you're drinking, and what you think of the pairings by using the chat function. Please do make sure that if you do that, you tick everyone rather than just hosts and panelists, because it's nice for everybody else to see your messages as well. If you've got any specific questions, you can always use the Q&A or you can pop them in the chat. We'll try and keep an eye on the chat as we go along. And if you want to disable the chat on the phones, if you're finding it a little bit distracting, then click the 3 dots next to the chat, then the bell button, and then click disabled notifications. And that should stop the external noise and mean that you can get on with the important thing of eating and drinking.
Great. Have you managed to cook up a feast, Emma?
I have. I've got the carbonara sat there, which is looking, actually, I think, looking rather good.
Oh, that looks so good.
I know
you better than mine.
We like showing each other food, don't we? And my 4 bottles of wine, which I have to admit, when everything started going a bit unravelled, I just poured myself a large glass of the Frascati, which is this one here. It's very nice.
Controversially speaking, having seen your carbonara, I feel like I should show you mine, although apologies. So I actually the black bits are slightly burnt pine nuts.
Lovely.
Controversial addition, but in my haste, as everyone I'm sure has burnt a pine nut in their lives. But I also went with the teeny little pieces of spaghetti because I had a fantastic carbonara-esque dish with lots of egg yolks and parmesan that was sort of much more just creamy because the pasta was so tiny.
Okay.
I was trying to remake that and had pine nuts open in hand, so it went crazy. In lieu of bacon.
Just looking at the webinar chat, Brian was saying that there was a typo in his join link, so he's wondering whether others are struggling to log in. Gil, I'm wondering whether it would be possible to send the invite out to everybody again. So did you have an issue with yours or?
Well, I guess I had an issue that mine was not the link for the panelists, it was the link for everybody.
But, yeah, no, that's fair enough. Gil's on it.
Otherwise, Gil. Thank you, Gil. And I'm glad that at least a number of us are here. I think we've got something like 45, 50 on the call, so we're all having a bit of an evening together, which is lovely.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. It's going to be a good night.
Because we're starting with the carbonara, aren't we?
We're starting with the carbonara. I'm kind of throwing a lot of stuff over at Gil at the moment. Gil, have you got the PowerPoint presentation to bring up at all, in addition to everything else that I've asked you to quickly do?
Here it goes.
Bless him. Thank you so much. Yeah, you see, that's a more
Very beautiful
chefy
carbonara.
carbonara. I think that's a Jamie Oliver carbonara, actually. So there's probably something in there that will upset the Italians, but I thought it looked really nice. So
Probably a slug of
pop that on.
cream. That's always seems to upset every Italian. Whenever all of us British people actually adding cream and dairy to our carbonara, or cow's milk to our dairy carbonara.
As actually, it's worth asking if any of the members have added cream or dairy. Although after you just said that, they're probably going to know.
I hope so. It often makes it very delicious. So
Yeah.
no judgment.
My husband did look at my carbonara and went, "It doesn't look like it does in the restaurant. I don't think this is absolutely right." And I was going, "This is correct. Don't wind me up further." So, and there's that Carl saying, "Obviously not."
Oh, very good. How did you make your carbonara, Emma?
I did mine with a lot of Parmesan, bacon lardons, smoked, a lot of Parmesan, and just egg yolks.
Yeah.
Because our neighbours next door, I've always got this thing about when egg white goes sloomy, it kind of isn't cooked through properly. It just makes me feel really it turns my stomach. And so when we went over for dinner to our neighbours, they did a big carbonara and they said, "Oh, we don't have that issue because we just use egg yolks." And I was like, that is the answer. And so since then, I've just done it with egg yolks only.
I've only ever used only egg yolks. I wonder which recipe I saw that from and ended up starting that way.
I think
I always feel guilty because I end up throwing away the egg whites.
Yeah, well,
I'm
you've
not
made
an egg white omelette girl, so I'm more of a meringue girl, but not tonight.
Excellent. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Frascati?
Yes. So we picked, or Emma and I picked the Frascati tonight because arguably carbonara has its origins in Rome, or at least I hope that's where Emma might go. But for me, the closest wine region to Rome is down in Lazio, which is of course the sort of main region around. And Frascati is probably the best known of the white wines from that region. And actually, we've been working with this producer for a very long time. So Pallavicini are a fantastic, really old estate. If you're in Rome and touristing around, really do go and visit this estate, because they have a beautiful old castle. It's a real sort of it's not a castle, that's far too northern perhaps, or too southern in Italy. It's a palace, and rightly so, but it's got many wings and it's incredibly beautiful. They have their own winery there, olive oil press. The estate is, of course, a very large estate that has mixed use. It's not just a winery. It has, agriculture and livestock and olives. And the sort of, I think all of that kind of combines to have this very long history and established winemaking style for Frascati. Because I think sometime in the past, Frascati was probably the old Pinot Grigio. I don't know if any members on the call remember buying two bottles of Frascati for £5, or 2 bottles of before Pinot Grigio became a big thing. Italy has always had this tremendous gift of being able to sell very large volumes of white wine to the UK, and they tend to go through trends. And Frascati definitely had its day and has now come out the other side. But actually, the having had its day, that built up quite a lot of wealth in the area. And when the trends started to sort of wane, at least Pallavicini were able to invest heavily in the winery to actually make a better quality of wine. Because previously, Frascati, perhaps 15, 20 years ago, didn't really taste of an awful lot at all. It was quite a bland wine. It was made in quite high yields and high volumes. Whereas now there's much more care. The grapes are really well handled. They're very well managed in the vineyard. And then they're made beautifully in the winery here in stainless steel, with no touch or sign of oxidation, which I think has been an issue in the past. But it means that the beautiful flavors can really come through. Yes, I always think this wine, it has quite a nose that opens. So it starts with that sort of lemony flavor, and it can feel a little bit shy. But actually, after a sip and as it starts to warm up, there are those sort of sage notes or gentle kind of green herbal notes that start to come through.
It's actually it's slightly richer and a little bit more complex, I think, than I typically associated with Frascati, not meaning to put it down, but I think perhaps kind of in my head, I still think back to the 2 for a £5 kind of thing. It has definitely opened up as well.
Yeah.
Because I've had mine open since about 6:30.
Yeah.
And then had it out of the fridge for probably that time as well. So yeah, it's kind of noticeable how much.
Yeah, and then I think we didn't talk to the grape varieties in this. So Frascati is the area, and this is a Superiore that we've suggested for tonight, which does as it says on the tin and suggests that this is the slightly higher quality level that they have created. And the way in which they get there is by controlling some of the yields that are allowed and various sort of lengths of time in winemaking. So there are some rules to follow to try and achieve higher quality for a Superiore Frascati. But the grape varieties here are actually a blend. So the majority of this is Malvasia. And I think Malvasia is the grape that we're tasting on the palate. So I think that's where it's a little shy and sort of has to open up on the nose. On the palate, it's actually quite broad and quite weighty. And for me, Malvasia is often one of those grapes that actually I particularly like it at this stage when it's very fresh.
Yeah.
Because with time, it can go a little bit, it can get more and more melony and honeyed as it ages. And some people love that. I'm not actually the biggest fan of that. I feel like it's really wonderful when wines have that tightness and direction, especially when you're pairing it with something loaded with Parmesan cheese.
Adds that kind of crispness to cut through the creaminess and the richness of the pasta. What do the members who are watching all think about it? If you have any thoughts, please do put them into the chat.
I'm also going to be very rude and eat on camera, so apologies.
No,
I'm going to have I hope you do too, Em, at some point, but
I will do, definitely.
Yeah, because I think Carbonara, it has a subtlety too. Perhaps in the sauce being much more about the sort of eggs and Parmesan and the saltiness. It's not the most complex of sauces. In your version, the bacon, in my version, the pine nuts are definitely giving it some of the more clear, characterful notes. But I think
so
slightly subtle wine goes quite well with that.
There's a really interesting one where they did it with I think it was with artichoke as well, charred artichokes, and I thought that would probably be really nice as well.
Yeah, no, I've definitely in Lazio, in fact, I've had fried artichokes served on top of a similar carbonara-esque sauce on some pasta. So it does work very well. And those sort of slightly more gentle vegetables, again, like not the most in your face. Artichokes are not the flavor that's going to take you out. It's subtlety, but it's delicious. And I think this wine works with this dish because they sort of match on that similar level. So subtle but slightly more delicious. As you get into it, you start to see more of the layers.
That's lovely. And Richard's just saying we're having it with pan-fried fennel. That would be gorgeous, actually. I'm quite jealous, Richard. That sounds really nice.
Does sound good.
So do you want a few facts and figures about carbonara?
Would love some. And then we should try the other wine.
I can't think of anything else you'd rather do on a Friday night. So
you know me and your fun facts. I love these things.
I do have some good facts about spaghetti, but this is kind of talking about carbonara itself. So as you said, it's most associated with Rome and Lazio region. But as with so many of the kind of Italian dishes, its origins provoke a lot of speculation and debate. So there seems to, with most of the Italian dishes, it seems to be a case of, well, it could come from here, but then it's probably that's probably not the case still. A lot of people say that it was created in the Allied liberation of Rome in 1944. American GIs bringing their daily ration of eggs and bacon to the local restaurants and added it to the limited Italian menu. And apparently there was a first written reference to the dish was in the newspaper La Stampa in 1950. It described it as a dish prized by American servicemen. So I have to say it's a dish prized by me as well. I absolutely love it.
I'm not surprised that that perhaps it got especially liked by Americans. It's got that slightly creamy, salty, sweet thing that lots of American dishes do have. So that kind of combination of bacon and cream and almost creamed cheese.
Yeah.
The yolk and the parmesan making that effect.
Yeah, it's very umami, isn't it?
And the starchy water. It's very, no, I'm not surprised that they loved it. But I suspect it predated them.
You think?
I think so.
Well, we'll go with that then. We'll keep it as a mystery. Who knows?
Who knows?
So the other wine that we were going to have with it is the
Falanghina.
Falanghina, isn't it? I'm trying to find which one it is there. Yay.
So we so in the pairings, I was quite keen to pick something contrasting that would be quite different. And I think the Frascati really has that tightness and the freshness that's cutting through the cheese and perhaps the salt and the fat. Whereas the Falanghina, especially as this is 2021, I was talking about how actually it's really important with Italian varietals and Italian white wines, how they age even over a year or 12 months, 12 months, 18 months. So 2021 is a deliberate choice. This isn't a sort of overorder or bin end, but Falanghina for me really starts to sort of richen and improve with a little bit of age. And so actually sort of 18 months ago, when first tasted, this would have been quite tight and a little bit closed. Whereas now this is showing much more of that sort of peach character. And I seem to love orchard fruit flavors. So that's I think, a more rich to match richness attempt, but still staying, I'm firmly in the white wine camp for carbonaras rather than the red wine camp, I'm afraid, because I really think that there's so much going on in the richness of a carbonara that needs the acidity of a white wine to really cut through it, and perhaps even the temperature of a white wine to cut through it.
Just to lighten it and freshen it.
Yes, but so Falanghina, to go back to the wine, is a native grape variety to southern Italy. It especially flourishes in Campania, which is where this is from. And this is from an area called Sanio, which is actually specially known for Falanghina. And it's made for us by a fantastic cooperative down in the south called Gardiensi. And Gardiensi, a really innovative cooperative, because they've got a huge number of members and they're trying to jolly everyone along into better practices and farming practices, or trying to embrace organics or sustainability, or not using too many harmful things that might compact the soil in the vineyards and all those sorts of things. So they've got a huge team constantly out trying to talk to the members to make sure that the farming side is taken care of well. And then they've really started to, congratulate the really good farmers by bottling the wine. So Gardiensi's major production is still in bulk. It's sold locally, it's taken off to be bottled elsewhere, or it's sold by, in local co-ops where members or villagers or local Italians can go with, milk cartons, whatever else, to fill up on some local wine. But the bottled range really gives the winemaker the ability to kind of give kudos to the growers that achieve that level. And it means that we have an amazing range of grapes to pick from. And he makes this specifically for us. And so the growers really get to sort of put their thumbprint on it and be quite proud that they're supplying us with our own label Falanghina. And it was something that Sebastian created because he really loved this grape variety, and he feels that this grape variety has the character and the charm and essentially the right level of quality to really be worth knowing and worth including within our society range. And I have to say, at the moment, it's smelling just fantastic. I love this kind of very ripe peach and apricot softness about the nose. And then hopefully on the palate, you're getting a little bit more of the that almost fennel. I think somebody was having roasted fennel earlier, but you might get some of that slight tarragon, fennel, licoricey note, which can sometimes come through.
And so Mary Jane was saying it really works with mushroom carbonara. And Richard's saying that actually it gets a touch of tangerine or clementine on the nose as well. And I was having a sniff and I was like,
orange.
Actually, really kind of like
that.
fresh, almost like orange kind of essence.
Although I'm slightly surprised at the touch of spritz. I suspect that if you just swirl your glass a little bit, Richard, that will disappear pretty quickly, given that it's now 2021. I think frequently on very newly bottled wines from Italy, we can get a little bit of spritz, because genuinely the common practice is to just put a little bit of CO2 in the top as you put the cork in, to make sure that you're protecting the wine from oxidation. And so if the wine is opened within a number of weeks or only a couple of months from bottling, that CO2 might still have a little bit of spritz, or put a little bit of spritz into the first glass. But generally speaking, after this sort of time, it's mostly just sort of disappeared.
Mitch is saying it did go.
Oh, great. Good.
So it's obviously giving it a good shake.
I have a lot of friends who quite enjoy that sort of first livener of that sort of sensation on the palate.
I think sometimes you get it as well when you've just first opened and first tasted as well, especially if it's first wine in the evening and stuff. It's that kind of the reaction of your palate almost.
Yeah. No, but I think for me, there's not only is there a touch of that like anise, fennel or tarragon, but there's also some nuttiness coming through.
It's a really lovely
with
wine.
all of that tangerine. I think tangerine is spot on, but that nectarine, tangerine, apricot. But nicely, I think there's some acidity still on the finish that is going to be the key with sort of getting to the food. But no, I have to admit, the Falanghina is a bit of a house favorite. We have it an awful lot, because it seems to be one of those very helpful wines that goes with a huge amount of food. So when I'm not so focused on picking precisely what I'm eating and what I'm drinking, which is probably most Wednesdays or Thursdays, I'm very happy to open a bottle of Falanghina with pretty much anything that I happen to be doing.
Rose was saying that she would have the Falanghina just with the food and the Frascati as an aperitif. I'm like, yep, way to go. That sounds perfect.
Excellent. Although if anybody does have the two open and in separate glasses, please do go back to the Frascati now, because it really is a wine that will continue to open up through the hour. I think it's a bit of a slow burn, but it will be. It's nice to have an aperitif, potentially then the Falanghina, and then to go back to the Frascati to kind of clear the palate. So of course, between many people responsibly, I'm sure you've got a whole party at the table. But it's a fun wine for kind of topping and tailing, because it can refresh the palate, which I enjoy. The 2022 Falanghina is now bottled. I've just signed off the next blend, and it will be live towards the end of the summer. So I tend to try and keep it as a sort of somewhat 6-month delay. So make sure that we're selling it after Easter is my main game, and then through the following year. Whereas with something like the Frascati, I tend to try and get it in as soon as I can. So January, the new vintages of those tighter, brighter wines will start coming onto the website. And you'll see that sort of changing with all of the whites from Italy, because I try very hard to stick to something that I enjoy drinking. It drives me crazy when I'm buying wine in restaurants and I don't know the vintage. And I think that if it drives me crazy, and it's exactly my job to be annoyed by that, because then I can do it for other people and make sure that that if I find it slightly annoying, everyone gets to have the vintage that I think is really shining. But of course, having fresh vintages, if you happen to be somebody that enjoys wine slightly more, when the whites have become a little bit more honeysuckled or a little bit softer and gentler and broader on the palate, then of course all of these wines will be great for a couple of years. You know, there's no real rush.
So members asking, how will the Falanghina change over the next 12 months?
So another 12 months, it will continue to kind of have, I think this is why Seb loved it so much, but it really does hold on to that vibrant fruit. So the nectarine, the tangerine, or the peach, the apricots, those will stay. But the Falanghina will get a little bit more spicy on the palate. So that licorice anise thing will start to grow. I think the nutty note that I get at the very finish. So the kind of, it might be because there's pine nuts in my pasta, but it also, I think, is sort of that slightly almondy toasted note side that will continue to grow. And there should be more of the sort of honeysuckle floral notes that really start to challenge the fruit. And it will, you know, it would be perfectly delicious to drink in 2 or 3 years' time. So there really is no huge rush. It's just a very particular preference that I think I'm meant to have and do.
So I think from the kind of chat, it seems that it's a little bit of a split between the Frascati and the Falanghina, which is good, actually. I hate it when one wine is just everybody goes, nope, I hate it, really dislike it, and then the other wine everybody loves, because you always feel sorry for the other wine. But there seems there's pros and cons to both of them, or pros to both of them. I can't see any cons at the moment.
Yeah, good. What I really like about the pair, though, and I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but is that they're both utterly different. And I think, especially for members that don't know, Emma and I met doing blind tasting exams. And I think we often had sort of fell back into this habit of saying, well, if it's sort of medium acid and medium flavor and medium body and it's sort of lemony, it might be Italy, like it might be Italy.
Lemon and apple.
Yes. And we had, and then we would like, so anywhere in Italy, it could be Fiano, it could be Suave, it could be anything. And actually that suggests that even, because Emma and I met 10, 15 years ago, but even over that period, things have definitely changed. Not only were we a little bit wrong with that assessment, but also winemaking on the native grape varieties for white wines in Italy has just never been better. And now you could never suggest that these two wines could be confused with each other. And blind, I think, smelling the opulence and that, and a very bright fruit flavor of the Falanghina compared to the much tighter, sort of more elegant Frascati. There's a lovely difference, and I get that consistently now, tasting across, you know, over 20, 30 different varieties from Italy that are all creating these delicious white wines. Very few, of course, that use oak. It's not a dominant winemaking technique for anything Italian. So no, hopefully it encourages you to taste a few more.
So you feel that the Italian whites are just on the up and up at the moment?
Yes, have never been better, especially for just enjoying. I always get the impression that the Italians, predominantly Barolo and perhaps Chianti and Brunello as the major exceptions, but predominantly want people to drink their wine reasonably young. Because it's meant for drinking. They've made it for enjoyment now, and for having with food, and for socializing and being outside and having all these wonderful kind of food and wine pairings. So yes, I think the white wines are fantastic. If you want something very serious for your cellar to drink in 20 years, it might not be Italian white, unless there are notable exceptions. But if you want something delicious tomorrow night, please buy
Italy's
some more Italians.
Yes. Wonderful. Do you think we should move on to the reds?
Absolutely. Right.
So I just put pass these over to my husband, who is very kindly prepping the tomato pasta for me.
Oh, lucky you. Whereas I put a plate on top of mine.
I can get this organised, but
so I do have mine with some additional greens, because I realised that I didn't have any vegetables going. thought I better have a handful of spinach. But I love tomato ragu. I think probably not dissimilar, hopefully, to lots of you, but probably weekly, my husband and I will have some sort of bolognese or ragu, or even just simple tomato sauce and pasta, because it is such a comforting dish. You know, I commented there were no greens in here, but there's tons of veg, you know, the tomatoes, the onions, the garlic, the you know, basil, all of those sorts of things. And I think even when you're just cooking it and smelling it, it's such a comfort.
Absolutely.
But the big thing is that often tomato, because of the acidity in it, as I'm sure you will tell us in a minute, isn't always the friendliest partner to red wine, or to wine in general. So we've tried quite hard to pick two wines that might go reasonably well with the dish here. Hopefully there's a good glug of some wine in your dish, which there definitely is in my tomato sauce. Now, which order were we going to do this in? I presume the Nero d'Avola first.
We are.
Great. So we're starting down in Sicily, because again, I was trying to make some links, and of course the best tomatoes, or some of the arguably best tomatoes in Italy, come from the volcanic slopes of Sicily. Of course, wonderful tomatoes from across southern Italy. I would be foolish to suggest that there is a place for the best tomato. There are just lots of excellent tomatoes, all of which I'd like to eat. And so the Nero d'Avola here is from Western Sicily. So it's not actually from the slopes of Etna. It's made by a fantastic older estate, family-owned estate called Cantine Rallo. And Cantine Rallo, again, make this blend specifically for us at the Wine Society. And I believe have gone on to then sell it elsewhere. But initially, this was something that Sebastian really loved in terms of the style of Nero d'Avola, because you may spot, Emma, that this is only 12.5%. And it's amazing to think that some of Italy's lowest alcohol wines are coming from one of the hottest, warmest regions. Sicily is, of course, well known for being completely beautifully sunny and incredible to visit on holiday, and wonderfully warm. And that would, we assume, lead to very ripe grapes with high sugar levels that would then convert to being quite high alcoholic wines. But actually, the local grape varieties, and Nero d'Avola is a local grape variety to southern Italy and to Sicily, they have learned to cope with the sun. And there are some theories that there's even so much sun in the middle of August that the grapes quite sort of historically shut down, and so don't produce sugar for a number of weeks as they sort of protect the vine. And they've done this for so many years that by the time they sort of restart, this isn't impacting the flavor development, because you often with Sicilian wines get this wonderfully intense flavor, but often with a slightly lower alcohol than you might traditionally expect. Nero d'Avola for me is always a red wine from Italy that gives you a bit of a hug. And I always love that Cantine Rallo doesn't use a huge amount of oak on this. So there's no oak, in fact, it's all stainless steel here. And for me, that lets the fruit really shine without the need for a slightly sweet element that would come from use of oak. So again, for me, it's that very cherry, very lovely, not sweet red and black fruit. It's quite tart, and even on the palate, I was saying it's sort of giving you a hug because it's quite soft, but it's sort of got that richness, but not over the top. It's not going crazy, which means I think that it continues to pair well with food. So it's still got some acidity, it's still got some tannins. And hopefully it will match some of the tomato sauces and ragouts in the room. How's it going for you, Em?
Mine is just on its way over to me. So
Ah.
I haven't had a chance
Oh,
to
we've got
try it yet. But my chef is about to bring it over, which is very appreciated.
what
Yeah,
do you think of the first sip of the wine though?
the best of the wine's beautiful. I love this wine. And it's funny because it's one of those wines where every time I try it again, I think, oh, that's lovely. I really ought to drink more of that. And then you kind of almost forget about it slightly. And then every time I come back to it, I think, oh, yeah, stop. Thank you. So that's mine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, good on Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
And yours is now nice and hot. I'm very jealous.
It is. Although, knowing me, I'll probably still leave it because I'm talking, and then I'll need it when it's staying cold anyway. But yeah, it's a lovely wine.
And of course, the other major ingredient other than tomatoes and in Sicily is aubergines. Pasta alla norma is a tomato and aubergine based sauce that is completely ubiquitous across Sicily and done fantastically. And in the best examples, perhaps best because I'm very true to a generation ago's Wigan roots, but the best have fried aubergines in the pasta alla norma. And that really does go well with Nero d'Avola. So again, aubergines being quite tricky with their kind of acid alkali taste of salt and something, and it can be quite difficult. But no, with Nero d'Avola, it seems to be gentle enough yet have enough to it.
Yeah, almost kind of full enough and enough kind of ripe, sweet but not sweet fruit.
Oh, I know.
But it copes with the bitterness that you can
and
have.
It somehow doesn't fight whatever's on your plate. So if you've got quite a complex dish, this is a wine I think that we can overlook because of its price point. But because this is quite inexpensive, and actually I think just because it offers such good value, we don't often pair it with some of the best dishes. But actually it's a great wine for that. Also on a hot day like today, Nero d'Avola is super if you popped it in the fridge. So had I not had a 2-hour commute home from Stevenage today with every train cancelled, I would have thrown it in the fridge for 20 minutes just to bring it down a little bit, because there aren't actually that prominent tannins, and it can chill and become a little bit tighter and a little bit more refreshing.
It's lovely. It's funny, thinking you're talking about wines that are happy to play second fiddle to the food. Reminds me of a food and wine matching quote I once read, which was food and wine matching is like having a conversation. One must speak while the other listens. And this is definitely a wine that will just be happy to sit back and listen while the food's doing the talking.
Yeah.
And it's great for that.
No, and I think sometimes we can get very worried about food and wine pairing. But actually, if you want to focus on one or the other, then that's totally fine too. And there are some, and if you might be fantastic chefs, or you might have a wonderful cellar. And if you have a wonderful cellar, then please feel free to just cook simply so that you can showcase the wine. And you can also then do very complex dishes when you want to showcase the food. And there are wines that will then go with it. And there is, of course, wonderful simple food that will go with complex wines. It doesn't always have to be a sort of equally matched high-pitched fever.
So true.
I think there's a wonderful YouTube video that Sebastian and Jancis recorded with Edward Penny Russell a long time ago. Well, probably not that, 30 years ago perhaps. And it's on YouTube now, so if anyone wants to Google it, it should be available. But it's a classic line that comes out around how Edward Penny Russell, of course, was definitely prioritizing the wine over the food. His cellar looked astonishing in the footage, and he had some very good wines on the table that he was sharing with Sebastian and Jancis. And so he makes a comment about how he would never have sweet sauce with the roast beef because could ruin the wine. And of course, I think there's time and a place for both. I would hate to cut out Moroccan tagines, which are, of course, a bit sweeter with honey and dates and prunes. But when I have them, I pick different wine. But here, the Nero d'Avola, I think, is working very well with what can be quite difficult to match genuinely as a tomato-based dish.
It's lovely. Lovely. So do you want me to tell you a little bit about tomato sauce?
Yes.
Bolognese actually was the first thing I looked
But
at.
I also wanted to know what you had. Is it a tomato sauce or is it a
I just went
ragu
for
or a
tomato
bolognese?
sauce. I went for tomato and basil.
Lovely.
Last year we grew an awful lot of tomatoes on the allotment. So kind of towards the end of the year, we realized that we had way more than a normal family could physically eat. So I ended up making a lot of tomato passata. And so it's been really useful because I froze it. And so now we've got lots of kind of access to really lovely tomato sauce. So again, it's simple.
I'm very jealous of your good life living here. I can't imagine having a glut of tomatoes in my life. But my one pot on the windowsill really doesn't.
I was going to say, but you do live in the centre of London, so you know
you can hear
you don't need a
everyone can hear the trains. Wonderful.
So bolognese, even though you might presume it has connections to Bologna, it does not. Historians generally agree that the dish originated in Imola, a city that sits just west of Bologna and is home to the earliest documented ragu sauce dating from the end of the 18th century. The first Italian cookbook to include tomato sauce, La Scala alla Moderna, the modern steward, was written by Italian chef Antonio Latini in 1692. And Latini served as the steward of the prime minister to the Spanish viceroy of Naples. So it was kind of felt that the tomatoes, well, the sauces kind of came in from Spain, kind of got mixed up a bit, and then the Italians, but I'm sure the Italians would disagree with that as well. So spaghetti bolognese is one of the world's most well-known pasta dishes, but it's inauthentic, as I'm sure you know. Italian cooks would not serve a thick, spicy ragu with thin pasta because the thin pasta can't hold the sauce. So they would normally serve it with large shells or tubes, which is what we've done this evening. Or very kind of long pappardelle or kind of tagliatelle, that kind of thing, something that holds the sauce more. So that then caused me to go down a rabbit hole of what pasta with what sauces. So generally larger shapes like tubes or shells work better with thick robust sauces. Skinny shapes like vermicelli, spaghetti, linguine, those sort of fusilli, they suit light cream sauces. There was a lot more there, but I thought, right, we'll just leave it at that.
No, and it does make such a difference. Like you're right. I fall into the trap of constantly buying just shop bought rigatoni and fusilli and sort of sticking to the two that I happen to like the texture of the most. But it's why I tried to use slightly smaller pieces of pasta for the carbonara earlier. But I can never be bothered with spaghetti and tagliatelle unless it comes fresh because of the having to squash it into the pan nonsense that always goes on. But I think I also eat in front of the TV too often and would spill far too much down my front.
I know that feeling.
I'm far too honest on these. I do. Members definitely see this as a zone of trust.
They very much do. Yeah, what goes on Zoom stays on Zoom.
precisely that. But no. So I'm also glad because the tomato sauce sort of origin had always sort of because it's so clearly associated with Bologna, the kind of bolognese and the ragu, and Imola of course is in Emilia Romagna, so very close, and I really thought that we were going to find its home there, but the best tomatoes are further south in Naples and Sicily and of course in Spain. So I'm not surprised to have seen a huge combination and a little bit of a battle for who owns what, and really that idea that no one perhaps owns tomato sauce, and it's just been perfected in certain towns and regions.
Absolutely, and it's still being perfected, I'm sure.
But we also now have what I think is a very helpful wine. So this is Barbera. So we are miles up in Piedmont. And it's by a particular favorite producer of ours, who are a Barolo producer called Ciabot Berton. And Ciabot Berton are run by just a fantastic brother and sister outfit. And the two of them have been managing this estate for the last 15, 20 years. He makes the wine and she sells the wine, does all the marketing, and perhaps a lot more aside. But the two of them work very closely together on pretty much all aspects. And Barbera, I had a conversation very recently with some Master of Wine students in one of my educational sessions about what's the next big thing from Italy. So what's going to be the next big trend at a premium to fine wine level. And we ended up really convincing ourselves that Barbera is going to be it, because it's very widely planted in Piedmont. We're already making the assumption perhaps that Sangiovese and Nebbiolo they've reached the top. They have already got that. So what's coming after them? And we were talking about the way in which Beaujolais seems to now be really rising up the fine wine agenda relative to prices and everything going on in Burgundy. As Barolo continues to also climb that ladder, members, please, if you enjoy Italian red wines and you're not looking at Barolo, buy a bottle of our exhibition Langhe Nebbiolo. It's not for everybody, but if you like it, then you're probably a Nebbiolo fan. And then I really encourage you to buy some Barolo in our en primeur offer each January, because it's never going to be these prices again. Every year it's going to go up. This is going to be the next 10, 20 years, Barolo is going to become scarcer and scarcer and more expensive. It's already fully planted and everybody is selling pretty much out each year. And the quality is totally worth it. So at the moment, Barolo is a great fine wine buy if you like Nebbiolo. However, Nebbiolo comes with all those tannins. It's also quite light in color. It can be quite spicy and quite savory. And it's planted side by side with Barbera. Barbera tends to be in the slightly lower plots, Nebbiolo in the slightly higher plots. They've always been planted side by side because they tend to like different conditions. And actually, I think as we start to make better Barbera, and as winemakers start to single it out and make it in smaller terroir specific or parcel specific lots, we're discovering that Barbera as Nebbiolo shows terroir extremely well. And I think with time, as Barolo becomes very popular and starts to go out of the sort of range of most of us normal people buying wine, Barbera might come to the top. And as it stands at the moment, a wine like this, again, I think offers great value. It is, I think, notably more complex than the Nero d'Avola. And it, of course, has a very different structure. It's quite firm. It's got some acidity. And here it's got a lovely little story. So it's called Fisetta, which is Italian for firework, because the specific parcel where these grapes were grown at Ciabot Berton had a little hut on it where they had kept some fireworks. And unfortunately, it did explode at some point. So the sort of fireworks in the vineyard are talking to the wine. And for me, this is one of the wines to look out for. I think these wines will be made with more focus over the next 20, 30 years and will continue to gain fans as Barolo and Piedmont also gains recognition.
Be interested to hear what everybody thinks about it and which one of the two is the favorite, because they are quite different, aren't they, in style? And they are both lovely. I do sit on the fence, don't I?
And there is a sort of there's a theory that Barbera and Dolcetto might be particularly good matches for tomato. Mm-hmm. So that acidity and bitterness might be quite offset by Barbera. So I'd be interested if that's working for you too. No, it's there are wonderful Italian and food pairings, and I'm sure, and if you haven't, I do encourage you to watch Stanley Tucci's wonderful series around food across Italy, and touches on wine as well from major regions. It is wonderful to go and eat locally, because so frequently Italians don't go beyond the village for what they're choosing to serve, especially in local restaurants. And that fixation on entirely local ingredients does, it leads to the rise of hundreds of different styles of pasta and nuances across sauce, but it also it allows for specialty to really develop. And for people to get really, really specifically good at something locally and be proud of it and take pride in it. And my trips to Piedmont, if you're a foodie on this call, they really are some of the most incredible for the foodie dreams, despite the fact that a lot of Italy's finest ingredients come further south, with the mozzarella and the tomatoes and the aubergines and all those sorts of ingredients. But Emma and I have luckily enough traveled to Piedmont together, and I'm pretty sure I couldn't fit into the clothes I arrived in after only 3 days. So I would encourage everyone to go.
I couldn't fit into my clothes, and my teeth became extraordinarily sensitive. I had to visit the dentist after trying very young Barolo.
A lot of tannin, but fabulous food.
So Tracy's doing a shout out for Genoa and the amazing pesto. I've never been, but
it's wonderful. I have a fantastic habit as somebody that obviously left home quite a few years ago, or perhaps not obviously, but I did leave home at the sort of average age in 20s, and in my early 20s. And despite that, my sister and I continue to go back on a cruise every year with my parents. And luckily, Genoa is somewhere that we have docked at once or twice. And going on the hunt for the best pesto I can find within a couple of hours of the port is something that I've been very pleased to do once or twice. And I totally agree, Tracy. It's wonderful, especially with green beans and little potatoes and the fantastic pasta, tiny little shape of pasta. How's the match going,
It's going really well, actually. And I was just reading, Lucy and Cheryl said that they thought the Barbera is quite high in tannin, so would need to have with food. Whereas the Nero d'Avola is just quite easy drinking. They're saying they're both nice, but they're very different in style. And I'm like, yeah, I really get that. I do like the Barbera.
I suspect if anybody's got some meat in their ragu, so haven't just gone for tomato sauces, but have gone for bolognese or for ragu, the Barbera then might be taking the edge on the Nero d'Avola. Whereas for me, I don't have any protein in the dish I have. So actually, I think the Nero d'Avola for me is winning the race. Because yes, the tannins on the Barbera are noticeably firmer.
Yeah, definitely. So, we talked about Genoa. Do you want to talk about other kind of regions that are synonymous with specific dishes?
Well, we just touched on one. So Piedmont, of course, is the home of buttery pasta. Going further south, everybody starts to use much more olive oil, of course. In the north, everyone uses a little bit more butter. We had wonderful tagliarini, which was the very tight, thinner style of tagliatelle, which is the local pasta shape. And it is drenched in butter sauce. And in season, it's of course incredibly decadent and laced with truffles. But out of season, it's also still part of the dish, and you can have wonderful ragu on it too. So there's a lot of venison or wild boar ragu further north. And then of course, everybody needs to at some point in their lives get out to Tuscan hills and have because I love Nebbiolo, and I really do believe Barolo is going to be out of my price range relatively soon, and so I'm buying as much as I can personally. But Sangiovese is the real king of Italian red wine and always will be for me. And the complexity of Chianti Classicos and Brunellos or Vino Nobile, they really reach some amazing heights. And I think Sangiovese, with its extra tannin and the very high acid, does perfectly pair with local Tuscan steak. But of course, cows are a big business in Tuscany, as well as grapes. And the wonderful beefsteak Florentina, laced with very olive oil rich roast potatoes. And a bottle of Chianti is pretty much my idea of heaven. I really do hope that if I ever have a last meal scenario, I get to pick the particular restaurant I'd like to revisit in the Tuscan hills.
You have one in mind already.
At least one. I'd probably like to do 2 or 3, but but no, that's a definite favorite. But we can't neglect, and I often do, because I have a preference very personally for red meat and for vegetarian dishes, but the seafood in Italy is completely astonishing. And I was recently buying on a buying trip down in Puglia and in Naples. I drove from Naples to Bari via Basilicata to see a number of our producers, and then quite far down into Puglia, so down to just south of Lecce. And the seafood that you start to encounter, especially in Puglia, is pretty astonishing. So incredible octopus and brilliant dishes that really do match the local wines very well. And you're sort of surprised, because Primitivo and Negro Amaro can be quite sort of boisterous, big, rich red wines. But actually with barbecued seafood, especially something like polpo or octopus, it really does match pretty perfectly. So no, there's a real change of cuisine as you hit the south. Although of course they also have lambs and wonderful fields of buffalo, so great cheese. But yeah,
that sounds really lovely. It's funny, I've visited northern Italy, central Italy, never hit the south. So I think the more you say about the food, especially the kind of the vegetables and how beautifully, I mean, one of the representatives that we used to always go out for dinner with, he used to talk quite frequently about the amazing array of really beautifully ripe vegetables in Bari. And I was like, gosh, that sounds like heaven.
No, I think there is a skill to Northern Italian cooking that is very clear for everyone to see, and is very beautiful. And the food is often very well considered. But the bounty of Italy's ingredients further south always sort of amazes me. And that's where I've had some of perhaps I always hope not to come across with a sort of stereotype, but slightly simpler, but equally astonishingly good food. And of course, I think the wines can, to some degree, mimic that. So some of the northern wines are known to be exceptionally complex. Looking at things like Barolo and looking at brilliant Amarones and brilliant Chianti Classicos, they can be complex and really very beautiful, and they kind of they look exquisite from the outside, and everyone knows they're going to be great. Whereas further south, it's perhaps a little bit more of a surprise still, but the wonderful kind of Aglianicos or Primitivos or simple Nero d'Avolas offering this kind of level of value. The Falanghina, again, what incredible value. These wines really do sort of surprise. And I think as we see some of the fine wine regions of the southern Italy sort of grow, so things like Taurasi or Etna or just brilliant kind of Negro Amaro from some of the sort of more southerly regions of Puglia, as they come to the fore, I think we'll really start to see the wealth of quality that these wonderful local grapes have. Are there any questions about? I've not been checking the chat as often as you, Emma. I've been letting you go for it. I'm seeing a lovely opportunity to carry a bag. I wish I had hand luggage room. I'm usually on a very cheap flight with everything in my rucksack, so it's not a lot to carry. But I do feel extremely privileged to have found a job that I can be so interested by, and that allows for such fantastic travel. I definitely don't take it for granted.
Well, it's hard work, but the food and the wine makes up
I think it's,
for
if
it.
you're not enjoying it, it's an astonishingly long day and it can be quite
Mhm.
knackering, but I enjoy it and it's wonderful.
Was it?
It's a privilege.
So as to say, I told you my pasta is tomato, basil, whatnot. Gone back and tried the tea again. I do think the Nero d'Avola pips the post, and I agree with you. I think that if I'd pushed the boat out a little bit more time and done something with a bolognese or something with kind of more protein in it, it would have maybe worked. That the Barbera is lovely as well, but that's already a personal favorite. So it's really nice to try the Nero d'Avola and kind of revisit it and go, oh, actually, excellent value for money as well. Such good value for money.
Yeah. No, I think as we're all looking for something that that might offer a little bit more value, because this year is how, whatever our circumstances, I think all of us have seen our electricity bills go up. I've just re-MOT'd the car and I couldn't believe how expensive my insurance had suddenly become for no apparent reason, and my AA quote seemed to have gone through the roof, and I'd forgotten that perhaps taxing was so expensive. The whole thing is a bit nonsense, and I'm sure it's been inflated this last year, and I just hadn't got my ducks in a row. But it means that we're often looking for very interesting and high quality wines that happen to be slightly more friendly on the pocket. And I think all of these start to speak to that, and you can get levels of complexity. I think that Barbera is a pretty complex wine for the price point. And hopefully that's the sort of that's what Italy can offer at the moment. So I do hope everyone gives it a good go. I know the current Italian offer has been well received, which I'm really delighted about. But if you haven't seen your post recently, or if you've not been online to have a look, I have shipped an awful lot of Italian wine. I think I had 130 in the offer. I think there's nearly 200 Italian wines currently online. So I've gone a little crazy because I'm trying such good quality wines. It's hard not to justify extra spots. So there should be hopefully quite a few new things for people to give a taste to.
Definitely. So has anybody got any more questions, or should we have another sip of our wines and I can finish off with another fact for you about spaghetti?
Yeah, wonderful.
I'm like, I love these really random facts. So according to the International Pasta Organization, if Italians ate all of their pasta in spaghetti form in a single year, they would eat 600 million kilometers of spaghetti, which is enough spaghetti to wrap around the globe 15,000 times. I was just like, oh, I love that.
Wonderful.
It's up there with my turkey facts, isn't it? And I was just like, oh, this makes me extraordinarily happy.
I love how we say that as though everybody knows. Emma and I also do a double act every Thanksgiving at the Wine Society, where we eat a Thanksgiving meal and drink some American wines. And Emma surprises us with cranberry and turkey facts most years. So if you ever fancy an in-person event at Stevenage, please do come along to that, because it's in our diary already.
Certainly
but
is.
I've loved the spaghetti facts. I think we last did this sort of food and wine back in lockdown, and some good facts then when we were cooking up. I think we did 3 pasta dishes though last time.
We did, yes.
Which was
quite full on.
But hopefully as participants in this, you've enjoyed the slightly more relaxed version of these events and had a nice bowl of pasta and enjoyed some of these wines. I know that Emma and I do enjoy these events, and we're always very glad that they don't go onto YouTube, because we're able to be much more honest with you all. And as we say, what's said on Zoom stays in Zoom. But I do hope that it's inspired you to try a few more of the Italian wines online, because I really do think they're punching above their weight at the moment.
Absolutely. And for me, it's actually, thank you, Sarah, because it's reminded me just how good some of the more off the beaten track, the more entry level Italian wines are, because you know when you think of Italian wines, you do tend to think of the Chiantis, the Baroles, you know, the Amaronis, those kind of wines. But these have been fabulous, and it's been a really nice, very chilled. Once we actually all managed to get online, very chilled evening. So thank you very much.
No, thank you ever so much for hosting and getting this all together, and thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate it. Taking time out to spend your evening with us and to hear about wine is just wonderful. Thank you.
So just quickly, any other top buys to look out for on the website?
Any other top
buys? Anything else that you
really loving? So I had a bottle of Cofflet Suave the other day and nearly went to heaven. So I think do look out for some of the old favorites. There's a new Timarasso online, a very good fine wine, white wine from Italy that we've not stocked before and is looking good. I also had in fact today, I sound just like an absolute drunk, but I had some of the Franciacorta today. And you'll notice, members, that we've got two bottles of two available Franciacortas online. And I was showing them today at lunchtime to some of our team internally to compare the two, and actually both were looking really, really very good quality for good sparkling wines. And then I should have a red at least, and it would have to be in the summer heat, Frappato. So go to Sicily and pick up a bottle of Frappato and pretend it's Beaujolais, stick it in your fridge and enjoy it. It's some of the most delightful cherry flavored, red berry fruited, subtle Sicilian reds that's currently on the market.
I have to say the Frappato is genuinely, it's not a technical term, but it's scrummy.
It is.
It's really just it's perfect summer wine.
Yeah.
Somebody has just said they heard that the noodles originated from China. Very true. He did put the ad in that he was Chinese, but I was like, yeah, it is true. Noodles existed in China and Asia long before they existed.
Made it to Italy.
Europe. And apparently
surprise me at all.
Marco
Whenever we
Polo.
look for the roots of distilling and fermenting, creating wine and distilling spirits, it always seems to end up going back to China.
Yeah, they were where everybody else was.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me.
Thank you ever so much to all the members who joined us this evening for coming along and listening to the two of us ramble on, or me ramble on about food and Sarah talk informatively about the wine. And a huge thank you to you, Sarah, as well, and to Gil behind the scenes for doing all of the. Gil, could you just pat your head, rub your tummy, and put a spreadsheet up at the same time? So, really appreciated, and we hope that you all have a really super weekend. And thank you.
The weather's on our side. Enjoy. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.
See you, Emma. See you, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Gil.